So, the first type of ethical violation is what's called staging, and this is with video and news photography. And that's when you are maybe out reporting an event and you miss the action. So, for example, let's just say you're at a sporting event and someone shoots a basket during a basketball game at the buzzer to break the tie. So they shoot the winning shot. You weren't ready. You didn't get the picture. You missed that opportunity. You can't have the player go back out onto the court and try to reshoot the shot so that you can get it. So you cannot go back in time or stage to make something look like you were there when it happened. Um, you also can't basically manipulate or tell them what to do. I need you to look like you're doing this. Um, unless you are doing that and not passing it off as that was the actual shot. So you can't rearrange reality for an interesting photo or for a photo that you may have missed for whatever reason. Or maybe you did um, get the shot, but you lost your SD card or it was really blurry or something. And definitely that has happened to beginning journalists. So you can't stage something and pass it off as that's what's actually happening. The second violation is what's called eyewash. And that is when you are using kind of an unrelated photo or you're using a photo to maybe get clickbait. Um, Also, you can never, ever, ever, ever publish a photo with your story from Google Images. We never, ever borrow things from Google. We either take our own photos, we reach out to people and give them credit for sharing their photo, or we have paid for a subscription database to professional photos. It's actually on the IMC reference shelf called Britannica Image Quest. So, for example, if we're writing an article about COVID-19 and we obviously can't take a picture of some of the virus graphics, we could go into Britannica Image Quest. The login is MTSD and the password is MTSD as well, right off the IMC reference shelf. And we could type in coronavirus or virus or whatever image we need, and then we would give credit to Britannica Image Quest and the photographer. But we can never take images off of Google. So eyewash has to do with us using as much as possible our own photography that is exactly related to the story. Okay, so we can't put a fancy picture to catch attention that's not related to the story because that is not representing the story accurately. Kind of an odd title, eyewash, but that's what it's called. The third violation is called selective editing. And this has a lot to do with what you might call today like photoshopping. So, where you maybe manipulate a picture by editing two pictures together, or the example that's given here, you only represent part of the story. So if there is a shooting, a man shoots someone but runs away, and a bystander comes to pick up the gun and holds the gun over the body, and a photographer snaps that picture, it looks from that picture that the bystander was holding the gun that shot the person, but actually that's a misrepresentation of what happened. So you have to be able to assure that whatever story you are telling, news story, feature story, that the picture is also aligning to the words in the story. Okay, and there are some examples that you might find in your research. Electronic manipulation. So this is actually manipulating either the color of a photo, again, using photoshopping to do extreme cropping. So you have to be very careful here. This is why I say try not to use a lot of filtering on your photos that we use for journalism, because it is changing the true nature of the actual image. So we try to not manipulate our pictures at all. We might lighten a little bit if they're under exposed, or darken a little bit if they're overexposed. But we really try not to alter the original image, and we definitely never Photoshop two pictures together. So here, if you are just trying to, again, fix over or under exposure, if you are very upfront about what you did to the picture, this picture has been altered, for example, for this reason, in this way. But if you alter a picture enough that it can change the messaging of the photo, that is electronic manipulation. So anytime we drastically change a photo, or if we were trying to create something for art purposes, which we have done in design, we label it as what's called a photo illustration, meaning we doctored this photo, we changed this photo, we applied art techniques to this photo. It just makes the journalist transparent in saying this is not the original photo. We changed it in order to send a different message, but you need to be upfront about that. So there are a couple examples there that you might come across in your research. And then the last thing has to do with privacy. And again, here we're not out right now in the community shooting photos, but there are a couple things I just want you to be aware of. So if you're on public property, so that would include the homestead campus, or most places in the community, you can take pictures pretty much at free will. But you have to be sort of a reasonable distance away. And oftentimes, as journalists, we like to get consent from the subject if we're going to publish the photo. But typically, we don't have to. If you are taking a picture, for example, of a private residence, you cannot be on their property, but you can take the picture from across the street. You can be in a store or a restaurant taking pictures, but if the manager asks you to stop, then you must, because you might be disruptive. If someone ever asks to take your camera or your SD card or your phone, that is your private property. That is not allowed. Sometimes, for example, a few years ago when there was a shooting on a college campus, one of the journalists happened to be standing outside and caught a couple pictures of one of the gunmen. And the police wanted to take the camera from the journalist, and he said, no, I could share the photos with you, but this is my private property. So those are just basically some of the overall privacy regulations. And then last slide, a couple of things I always say to my journalists are kind of go with your gut. So we don't typically get involved in really touchy, uncomfortable situations where, we're taking pictures of a gruesome accident or a really private moment. But I will say that one time when I was pulling into the parking lot of school, I did see a random drug search in process. In other words, the drug dog was out in the parking lot sniffing cars, and I took a picture, and the police officer yelled at me and told me to mind my business. And I said, well, actually, I'm on public property. And so I was capturing that picture for a story that we were going to do about the drug search. I did not take a picture implying that anyone's car was being sniffed or that anyone was guilty. Obviously, I wasn't trying to create a story that wasn't there. I just wanted to document the news that was actually happening. So just kind of depends on the situation, but if it's a newsworthy situation and it's not uncomfortable or it won't harm anyone, then if you have followed your ethics correctly, then you could use the photo. Again, if we're taking a picture and it would cause trauma to people involved, that would be very rare, but that would be something that we would discuss. We have had situations after a really significant sports loss, for example. I remember a football player taking his hand and pushing it into one of our photographer's cameras because they had lost a big game and a lot of the athletes were crying, and the photographers, not that they were up in their faces, but they were trying to capture the moment. And so obviously you just want to use common sense, but I did buy some bigger lenses after that incident so that we didn't have to stand so close to the action. So again, just use your gut, be compassionate, be sensitive, but also realize that you do have rights to capture news. And a lot of people don't look at student journalists as real journalists. And what I'm going to tell you today is that you are getting all of the training that every journalist needs in order to practice journalism. To me, you are a journalist now.